Hi everyone. In this series of short videos, we are going to learn how to use TinyCAD to draw electronic circuit diagrams for free. TinyCAD is an intuitive, easy-to-use computer-aided design or CAD package that you can use to draw neat, professional-looking circuit diagrams, which you can then use for lab reports, projects, or assignments. It's also pretty handy for teaching. In this first video, we'll go through downloading and installing TinyCAD, and then we'll draw a simple circuit. Okay, so to download TinyCAD, we have to go to tinycad.net. Okay, so we need to go to tinycad.net. All right, and from here, we can go to the Download Now link. Just click that, brings us to SourceForge, and from here the download will start in a couple of seconds. There we go, it's downloading now. You can see it down here, and it's a fairly small file, so it doesn't take too long to download. I'll just give it a second here. Once the file downloads, you can either click here on the link if you're using Chrome, or if you're using a different browser, you may have to go to the Downloads folder. So I'll just show how you do that. Just click here, and then go to Show in Folder. Okay, and at this point then I just have it here in my Downloads folder, so I can double click the file to install it. Now of course Windows will want you to give permission, so we just go yes. And from here we can start the installer. So just zoom in a bit. Okay, then click on next. Just have a look at the terms and conditions, click on agree, and install. If you want to do it for everyone who's going to use this PC, select that, or if it's just yourself, just leave it as it is. So click next, and then click install. Okay, it'll also install the Microsoft Visual C++ distributable. Okay, and then we can just click on finish to run it. Now I'll zoom back out. Okay, so we can see the program starting up. So the first time it starts, you will get a screen like this where we can check for automatic updates. So we may as well check now. Okay, so no new version, which is fine. So we'll just maximize this screen here now, and we'll open out the drawing window. So if we look here, we have the main drawing area, and we have various menus. Okay, so before we start doing a drawing, we'll just have a quick look at some of the menus that we have up on the top left of the screen. So we first of all have the File menu. Under the File menu, you just have the usual options that you have in a lot of programs. New for a new document, open to open one you've done already, close to close the current one that you're working on. Then we have Save As and Save. So normally you'd have to save your diagram first by using Save As, and then after that, once you have given a name, you can then just use the Save option from time to time. Then we have Design Details. So in Design Details, what this is a box that allows you to fill in some information for your drawing, such as the title, what the name of the drawing is going to be, who made the drawing, the organization that might have been involved in creating it, what revision of the drawing you have, is it the first attempt, or is it, one of many, and the number of sheets and so on, and the date. So just some useful information. Where that actually goes is down on the bottom right of your drawing. Just zoom in here, it's this box here. Okay, so this is in most kind of professional drawings, just some information about the drawing itself. Okay, so then back up to the menu, we also have import. This just allows you to import part of a drawing that you've done already from a different file, perhaps, from another TinyCAD file. And then we also have export as image file. So export as image file allows us to export our file as either a bitmap or an EMF, and that can be useful if you want to export the diagram that you've done into, say, a Word document, for example. Okay, some kind of word processor document or a presentation. We'll have a look at that in another video. And then we have, again up here, we have in our file menu, we have print, page setup, print preview. So, you might want to set up your page to suit your printer. Okay, whether you want to do things in landscape or portrait, and the size of your paper and so on. Okay, and then we have the last option really is just the last few drawings that you've done. So if you haven't done it, you won't see any here. But as you work on drawings, you'll see them start to list here. And it's handy, just a quick way to find them if you can't remember where you saved them to. Okay, so up along the top then, as we were doing before, we also have the edit menu, which just allows us to do things like, say we made a mistake, we could undo it. And then if we decided, oh, that's actually not a mistake, we can redo it. We can copy and paste, and we can select objects here, just like in any other Windows program. Then we also have find, if you're looking for a particular reference in the drawing. If it's a fairly big drawing, it might be quite complex, so you might need to search for it. You can put in the details here, and it'll find it for you. Or you can zoom in and you can zoom out of your drawing. Okay, so that one is quite useful. And then you also have a library. Now, libraries are things that contain different types of symbols that you might use in different diagrams. We won't go into this part of the series, but we might look at that later on. And then special gives us a whole bunch of other options which are useful for things like if you want to create printed circuit boards, or if you want to use circuit simulators. You can export the details of your schematics, which can then be used in that process. But again, a little bit complicated for now. We might maybe look at that in a later episode. Some options then, so some settings that we have. So you can see here, I'm just going to look at that again. So we have things like settings for the grid. And we also have things like settings for your wires, so whether the wires will snap to various different devices and so on. And the grid settings just in terms of determining whether you're going to show your grid and whether things snap to the grid. Very handy if you want components to kind of connect to each other properly. And then also you can adjust the size of the grid, how many millimeters there are in between the different points, and whether you're using millimeters or inches. Then some backup settings. This has just got to do with how often you want it to automatically back up your drawing, because this can be really annoying if you've done a nice drawing and then your computer shuts down for some reason. Okay, so that's a useful one to have there. Okay, going back to the top, we have, just cancel that a little bit. So we have colors. So we can choose colors as well. Okay, I tend to leave these at the default, but if you have your preferences, you can change things like the color of the wires that you use and what colors buses are represented with and so on. Background color, you can set that. Like, you might prefer working in inverse, so you might prefer a black background with white wires, but I just tend to leave them as they are. Okay, and back under options again, we also have just things like show your position. So this is the position that your cursor is at. The next one then is snapping to the grid. Sometimes you might want to turn that off for a certain, to get precise movements, but again, you can adjust the sensitivity of your grid. And then repeat directions, where it can do things like if you're creating components or adding in components, it could have changed the number of each one automatically. And that's kind of nice. Just also toolbars as well. There's different toolbars along the left hand side here and along the top of your screen. So you may or may not want all of those. Sometimes you like to simplify it by getting rid of ones you never use. And that's how you do it. Once the tick is there, you should be able to see it. If you untick something, it will disappear. So for example, if I untick a symbol, okay, now I can't choose any symbols on the left hand side because I've removed it. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to go options and I'm going to turn that back on. Okay, so the next one we have is window. And this one is really just about how the different windows you may have open will be shown. We only have one open, so it doesn't really matter that much, but you could have them cascading or tiling. And then finally, we have the help menu. Okay, so there's a user manual here, which you might find useful. There's also a support forum, which you can go to and you can ask questions, or you can see other questions that other people have asked, and also has links to the website. Another useful feature, just check for updates, but it usually does that when you start up, and then you have your About TinyCAD option as well. Okay, so that's that part done. So next, let's just look at the other pictorial menus up along the top. Okay, so we have new document, open a document, save a document, copy and paste. And then we have this one here, which allows us to do things like add labels, wires, joints for wires together, grounds and power and so on. And then we have various ones for putting in symbols. This actually just turns off the symbol picker. We have this one here, the pointer for editing. That's very useful. And then we have a couple of ones here which have to do with flipping, okay, and moving, manipulating components. But if you don't have any components in place, then you can't use them. So then moving on a little bit, we have text. Okay, so you want to put text in your drawing again. We can draw shapes, because sometimes there might be components that aren't available in the library, so you may have to draw them yourself, and we might look at that in another video. And then little notes you can put on your page as well. Okay, things like arcs. Then we have another menu for doing buses. Okay, so sometimes in large electronic circuits we use buses to kind of represent maybe bundles of wires carrying signals from one place to another. Okay, and then we also have some things here you can do with blocks of components, so you can kind of group them together. And then we just have the sort of location in our drawing. Okay, when I move the mouse around there, you can see that the coordinates, if you want to call it that, change as I move my mouse around. Okay, and then we have just the last bit of this menu. We have snap to grid. You can turn that on or off. And then we have adjusting our grid for fine. So we can click here. You can see 1 millimeter, 20 millimeters, 10 millimeters, 5 millimeters, and 2.5 millimeters. So 10 millimeters is probably fine, but you can change that if you want. Okay, so then back here, this is the only other menu then really, and this one is where we get to choose components that we want to place into our drawing. So there's quite a large selection of components already, and if we wanted to look under, say, 7400 series TTL chips, we can put in the we can select here, and if I zoom out again, we can see that symbols are being shown here. Okay, so depending on what I click on, different symbols will appear. They represent the symbol, the item that you're going to put into your drawing. Okay, so we're going to do a simple drawing, and we're going to use some components that we select from here in our drawing. Okay, so this picture here is a representation of the circuit that we're going to do as a schematic in TinyCAD. It could have been something that you just built in the lab and you want to do a kind of a nice, neat diagram of that to put into a report. So if we look here at the picture, on the left-hand side we have a 9-volt battery. We have over here a switch, just an on-off switch. Then on the right-hand side we have a resistor. And then down here we have a light emitting diode, or LED. So what happens with this circuit is we have a wire coming from the positive terminal of the battery going into one terminal of the on-off switch. So once this switch is turned on, it will allow a current to flow through this wire into this resistor here, and then through the resistor into the positive anode of the LED, and then through the LED, and then out the negative cathode, along through this wire here, and then back into the negative terminal of the battery. So we have a complete circuit. So although this diagram does show that fairly clearly, we want to be able to put it in terms of a schematic diagram, which looks a little bit different. Okay, so now that we know what we want to draw, I've gone back to our TinyCAD diagram, and you can just see the blank diagram here. So I want to zoom in a little bit on it, so I'm going to use my mouse wheel and I'm going to push it forward, and that allows me to zoom in. And you know, if I zoom in enough, you can see that the grid is now showing. So what I want to do first is I want to start placing components. So the first component I want to put in is a battery. So I just type battery here in the filter. Then we can look at a selection of different types of batteries. So you have single cell batteries, multi-cell batteries. And so the one I want to use just is this one here, multi-cell. And in order to be able to insert it into the diagram, I have to click on the symbol itself, and then I can then position it where I want in the diagram. So that's about it. I just click there and it's positioned. Now it leaves it on battery so I can put more batteries in if I want, but I don't want to do that. So what I want to do is just click here. Okay, back on the edit arrow. Now if I did happen to put in another battery and I wanted to get rid of it, all I have to do is click on the arrow, click on the battery, and then press the delete key on the keyboard and it's gone. Okay, if you find that when you click something you can't select it, just make sure you click on the lines, because if you click in the white space sometimes it doesn't register. Okay, so the next component we want to put in then is a switch, but before we put that in I'm just going to change a couple of settings on the battery. So click the battery, and then here I want to call it B1 as my reference. I'm going to click here for reference to show that, because it's not normally displayed. And then here I'm going to just change it to 9 volt. 9 volt bat. Okay, and press enter. That's that changed. Okay, so the next thing then I want to do is put in my switch. So IPCH switch, and let's have a look. Okay, so we can see there's lots of different options here, and if we use the arrow keys we can move up and down through them. Okay, and this is the one I want here. It's a single pole, single throw. So if I click it, I can then position it up here. Okay, so that's that one done. So next I want to put in the resistor. Okay, so for resistor, I go here and I type in resistor. Again, we have a few different varieties. Okay, so we have small ones, big ones. We have variable ones. This one here is the American version of the standard resistor. And here I'm just going to select the European version. They're the same thing, it's just a slightly different way of representing them. So I'm going to click here on the symbol itself, and then I'm going to place it somewhere over here. Now the value that we have for this one, I'm just going to put in a value for it. So again, click on the thing itself, set the reference up, and then put in a value. So I'm just going to put in 330 ohms. It's a typical resistor. Okay, and then the last thing we need then is to put in the LED itself. So if we just put in LED on the search, we can have a look at different types. And there are quite a few different varieties in this, different ones to choose from. But I'm just going to go with this one. So again, click here. And I'm going to position it somewhere where I think it should go in my circuit. Now the only thing is, it's pointing up, which isn't really the way we want it to point. So I need to click on the arrow, and then I click on the symbol and go to the tool options, and you can see that up is currently selected. So what I want to do is select left. Okay, now there are other options. You could mirror it, okay, if you didn't like the way it was pointing, but I don't really need to do that. Actually, I'll leave it as it is for now. And then I'm going to click on the LED and just move it slightly just to position it. Okay, and that's pretty much that. I'm just going to change the reference. Let's call it D1. Okay, so we have all the different components. All we need to do now is connect them up. To connect up our components, all we need to do is go to the wire option up here in the top menu and click it. And then once we bring our mouse cursor close to our components, you'll notice that it highlights the end of the wires of the components, or leads. Okay, so if we want to connect two things together, we just click where the circle appears, and then we can just move our mouse around, and it can turn around corners, and we bring it to the component we want to connect to. And we click again. Okay, and then we do the same thing. Okay, so click here, and we can connect to our LED. And because we have snap on, these should line up correctly with each other. Because if you don't have snap, sometimes it can be hard to get the leads to line up. So the next one, just click it again and click here and click down, and we can just click the next one. Now this one is acting slightly odd. Oh, yeah, that's okay. Now, okay, so it's all joined up. So that's essentially our circuit. It's fairly straightforward. You can customize it a little bit. You can move components around a bit if you want to. So say your battery, you want to move it around, you can do that. It might look a bit weird if you put it out to the side, but if you wanted to move it up or down, it should be fine. Okay, same with this component here. And let me just check the little image that we had. Okay, we can see in our little image that, yep, everything seems to be there, all right. So I'm just going to remove him again. Okay, so great. We've pretty much done up a circuit. So I'm just going to have a look at some of the other options on some of these. So if you look at our switch, you can see here that it has switch SPST, right? So say I didn't want to show that, I can actually double click here and it toggles that label going off. So I could just put SW1 there, and I could show that by clicking here, and now it shows SW1. Okay, so that's that. There's some details here that are not filled in. They are useful if you're creating information for printed circuit board or circuit simulation, but we don't need them in this case. We're just doing diagrams, so we don't need to put in those details. One last thing we might want to do before we finish our circuit is just go to the File menu and select Design Details. And then from here we can put in some information. So I'm just going to call it LED circuit, author me, organization text box, revision 1, number sheets 1 of 1, and the date. Leave the date out for now, but that's it. Okay, so we can click OK. And then what will happen here is if we zoom out of our drawing, I'm using the mouse wheel, by the way, to zoom in and out. Okay, so roll the mouse wheel forwards, zooms in, roll the mouse wheel backwards, zooms out. And then you can use your right button. When you hold down the right button, you can move the diagram around. Okay, so I'm just going to zoom out, and then I'm going to go and have a look at what's in this part, and you can see that the details area of the drawing has been filled in based on the design details we put in. Okay. So once you're finished doing your diagram, I'm sure you'll want to save it after all your hard work. So just want to go up to the File menu, select Save As, give the file a name, kind of suits what you want to do. So LED circuit, and click Save. And that way your file is kept in case you want to do some work on it later on. Okay folks, thanks for watching. In the next video we will do a slightly more advanced diagram, and we'll also look at how to export images and how to adjust some of the grid settings. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, maybe you might consider giving it a like and perhaps subscribing. So see you next time.